Okay, here we go, part 7.
Palm slides across the, and I think you testified that Mr. Bryan said that he thought Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver door of the truck.
He did. At one point, Mr. Bryan stated that Mr. Arbery was moving along the truck, the driver's side of the truck. He interpreted that movement as Mr. Arbery may be trying to reach the door handle and open the truck, so he gunned the truck and shot forward.
Did he explain what he was thinking or feeling as Mr. Arbery was trying to reach in the truck, whether he was fearful or that he thought Mr. Arbery was trying to steal his truck or carjack him or anything like that?
I don't recall him making any kind of statement of that. But that is, again, after he's trying to block him in. And subsequent to that, he continued to pursue him and try to block him in.
Okay, fair. But you're saying there's no statement by Mr. Bryan that he feared Mr. Arbery was trying to get in his truck?
I'm saying I don't recall any statement that I have reviewed of that.
Okay. Do you need your case file? Because a lot of the answers we're starting to get are I don't remember, I don't recall.
No, sir. I did not do the interview with Mr. Bryan, so I cannot answer something that I have not reviewed the recording of or the interview of him. You're asking me, has he said that? I can only tell you to what I have knowledge of.
All right. So you haven't really completed your review of even the video and the interview of Mr. Bryan?
No. Sir, my agent has interviewed him. He's reported back to me of what it is. He has to complete a report, which is attached. And then at that point, I will sign off on the report and attach it. That's part of the process. However, you're asking me specific details about an interview that I was not present at, nor did I review a video on. So I cannot be definitive to say he has not said something if I was not there. I do not want to misspeak.
I got it. And now I understand that you haven't reviewed the video of the interviews. I understand that.
Sir, I don't even know if there is a video. It could have been audio of the interview my agent did with him.
Okay, but I now understand you haven't reviewed that yet, and that's why you're...
Okay, so he's getting him irritated, which is good. You shouldn't get irritated on the stand, although it's hard sometimes. And earlier, what he's kind of get the point is that you made a determination to charge my clients before you had all the information. And even now, at the preliminary hearing, you're the case agent. Because their case is so big, you can't even bring it to court. You couldn't download it. And because you didn't bring it, you get to answer all of my questions with, I don't know, I don't recall. He didn't answer one question from the prosecution with, I don't know, I don't recall. Yet he answered here, and I mean, I don't know how they would get this in, but the defense, it'd be like, oh, so do you recall your testimony during a preliminary hearing? Because you answered 37 times with, I don't remember, I don't recall, or I'm not sure. So, and when the defense or the prosecution asked you questions, you didn't answer once. Objection, Your Honor, that has no relevance whatsoever. I'm just trying to clear up whether this officer is better prepared than he was at the preliminary hearing. Because I was told at the preliminary hearing, Your Honor, that they were still an ongoing investigation. They had a lot of things to do. So I'm trying to clear up, is everything done now that we're in trial? Make him look like shit in front of the jury. Create doubt in the jury. Make the government prove their freaking case instead of let the government just run their political agenda.
Your answer is I don't know. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Is it significant to you at all if Mr. Arbery would be trying to break into that truck with Mr. Bryan?
No, sir. Again, at this point, I think Mr. Arbery's trying to escape. I would say that he's trying to get away. And Mr. Bryan continues to pursue him and try to block him in again. So
he's trying to get away from Mr. Bryan. Oh, I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, yes, no, yes. You're asking me if it's significant whether or not he was trying to open the driver's side of the door. My answer is that no, because I think Mr. Arbery is motivated by a desire to flee based upon all.
So, let me get this straight. How many fleeing people who are scared of a vehicle tries to open the door? Are you freaking kidding me? How many times have you seen a suspect run from the police, and while he's running, he runs back to the police car and tries to open the door and get in? Are you freaking kidding me? That is a critical point that he tried to get in the car. That creates fear. That shows that Mr. Arbery was not scared. He wasn't fearful. He was actually being aggressive, even though he was so-called being pursued. His fear was so limited and minimal that he actually tried to get in the car. Later, he tries to take the gun away from him. How do you get he was fearful and that he was running and escaping and fearful? That does not sound like the actions of a person who is scared.
The information that this has. Also, Mr. Bryan continued to pursue him and try to block him in after that.
Is it your
my understanding?
Okay. Is it?
Well, of course he did. He had guns, and he was trying to take him into custody, and he was waiting for the lazy-ass cops because somebody called 911, and they hadn't got there yet. So, of course he's going to keep chasing him. He's already started chasing him. I mean, what is that? So he's trying... So This guy's trying to paint the image that the guys with the guns weren't scared. Mr. Arbery was scared. He was so scared, he tried to climb in the truck with two guys that he said he was scared of. He tried to get in the truck with him. He later attacked one of the guys with a gun. That's how scared he was. He was trying to run away and so scared and so innocent, he was just out jogging, that he tried to climb in a truck with two guys with guns, and then he tried to take a gun away from one of the guys. Man, this dude's got a funny way of dealing with fear.
Your understanding or your opinion that Mr. Arbery was trying to get into the driver's side of Mr. Bryan's truck so that he could use it to flee?
Judge, I'm going to object. I think this has been asked and answered, and I don't believe it's pertinent to the issue of probable cause as to the issue of the arrest warrant.
Is there some reason we just don't play the interview?
No, sit down.
Your Honor, I just understood that his testimony on direct was about this interaction, and I'm just trying to follow up on his direct testimony. So is it your belief or understanding, because you're saying that you believe...
Another point about these attorneys, the one facing the most crime and that is least likely to get a deal, which is probably the shooter, his attorney will be the most aggressive. Because he has no points to make, and it doesn't matter if he pisses off the DA. Now, the other two defense guys who are looking for a deal may be very friendly to the DA. They may not push the issue. They may not object and try to help any other person because they don't want to ruin their good standing with the DA, and the DA may cut them a better deal. So these, again, are behind the scenes on what attorney games are played that most juries and most people don't have a clue if they've never been through a court hearing.
I believe Mr. Arbery was trying to escape.
It is my
Are you
belief.
saying that he's trying to get into Mr. Bryan's truck and take it over so he can escape?
No, sir. Mr. Bryan indicated that he interpreted Mr. Arbery's actions as trying to open the door.
Okay.
I don't have an opinion whether that was actually true or not. I'm just telling you, my opinion is that at this point, Mr. Arbery is trying to escape.
Okay, how many people try to escape, try to open a door? That's ridiculous. And if you're an investigator and you investigate a car, did you print the car to see if Mr. Arbery's prints were on the door handle to corroborate the statement? Or did you just ignore that because you don't want to believe it? Because if you find fingerprints on the car door handle, it makes your case stronger. It makes the defense case stronger, and it weakens your case. Maybe that's why you didn't try to get prints. Man, if the defense knows they didn't try, now if they know they got prints or they tried and they didn't get it, maybe I wouldn't bring this up. But if I know they didn't try, I'm bringing it up. Why didn't you take prints on the door handle? We could have proved Mr. Arbery tried to get in a car, which proves that he wasn't fearful. He was trying to actually carjack them and get in a car. He had just left one crime scene. They got to keep getting in that crime scene. He had just fled from one crime scene of trespassing and possible burglary. We haven't proved that it's burglary. That's why I said possible burglary. He fled a crime scene, and now he's trying to get in a car. He was not scared. He got caught in a commission of a crime, and he was trying to get away. And not only was he not scared, after he tried to get in a car and couldn't, he tried to take a gun from an armed suspect. And he probably would have used the gun. Not only did he try to take the gun, he was swinging and punching a guy with a gun in the head when he could have easily stopped. Like when they asked him, "We just want to talk to you." But he was scared. Doesn't make sense he was scared. Scared people don't try to get in a car. Scared people don't run away. Scared people don't try to take guns from people and punch them. That's not the actions of most scared people.
Okay. Did Mr. Bryan say that Mr. Arbery intentionally committed damage to his truck? That he attacked his truck?
Yeah, I don't recall.
Man, his I don't recalls are, he's sounding like Jeff Reisig, the crooked DA, doing his deposition. I think he said, I did a video on that. I think he said, I don't recall, I don't remember, like, I don't know, 27, 30 something times. It was crazy. Every question you ask, I don't recall. Well, here's an email. Does that refresh your? No, I don't recall. You're looking at an email where you typed it. No, I don't recall. This guy's starting to sound like Jeff Reisig. Shit, he ought to go try to apply for a job for Reisig, man. He likes crooked cops.
I don't recall being told whether the... Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that answer.
Following this exchange, I guess, between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan's truck, what happens next as far as you know?
My understanding is Mr. Bryan continues to pursue Mr. Arbery up Burford. When it comes to Holmes Road, Mr. Arbery turns onto Holmes Road. Mr. Bryan initially is on Satilla Drive. He turns and then goes down Holmes Road in pursuit.
Okay, may I stop you for just a moment?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any information that Mr. Bryan was communicating with Travis or Greg about the next steps that played out between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan? That Mr. Bryan was saying he's going on Holmes now. That there was any calls or communication between them?
I do not have any information about that. That's right.
Or that, okay. And you said that Mr. Bryan goes straight down Satilla, essentially, but
Well,
Mr. Arbery turns right on Holmes.
I think he's pursuing, my interpretation is that he overshoots when Mr. Arbery cuts suddenly down Holmes to try to get away, and then Mr. Bryan had to turn back and continue pursuit.
Do you have any information that Travis or Greg saw where Mr. Arbery went, whether it was Satilla or Holmes or otherwise?
No, from the interviews, it appears to me that Travis McMichael's intention was to come back through Zellwood and try to cut Mr. Arbery off here, with Mr. Bryan here and Mr. Travis catching in.
Okay, this goes back to my earlier point. They lost sight of him several times during this time. And not one, well, only one attorney's asked so far. Nobody's asked, is it possible that he got rid of the thing that he stole from the house? Is it possible he could have stole something when he's running and that's why he didn't want to get caught? And that's why he was running. And then after he got rid of those things, now he confronts them because he knows he doesn't have evidence. Is that possible or reasonable? Has that ever happened in your career? Because it's happened in mine. It happens in a lot of cops. Guys run till they get rid of the gun or dope. And then as soon as they get rid of the gun and dope, they run a little bit further, then they give up. And they go, man, why are you chasing me? I'm all innocent. And then we go back and search and we find a gun and dope that they throw. So this is a very common scheme and design of how criminals work. I still haven't heard Mr. Arbery's criminal history, I don't think. Maybe I did.
Catch him between them here. That's my understanding from the interview.
Right, so your understanding is that, what information do you have that Travis McMichael said, I'm going to go up this direction and come down Holmes because I know I can catch Mr. Arbery there? How is it that he is informed, in your opinion, that Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road?
No, I say that he's wanting to catch Mr. Arbery here, but when he comes down Holmes Road, he sees Mr. Arbery.
You think he sees him?
Yes, sir. I believe he says that in his interview.
Okay, so when he comes on Holmes Road, he says he sees him on Holmes Road. Is that right?
Yes, sir. Well, the shooting took place on Holmes Road as well. So during the interview, my understanding is that he sees him here on Holmes Road. But again, like I said, he definitely says he sees him on Holmes Road. He shoots him on Holmes Road. It's his statement.
So let me just break this down because I want to make sure I understand.
He shoots him on Holmes Road. Your Honor, he's just made a statement that my client shot him without any context whatsoever, that Mr. Arbery attacked my client and tried to take his shotgun. And he just made it sound like my client shot him for no reason. I object to that statement. Now, I don't know how he would get that in, and the judge may go, I don't care. He can say that. In fact, he did shoot him. Yeah, but, you can't just, if a guy's on trial for rape, you can't just say, he raped, that's where he raped the client. Every time they ask you a question, yeah, that's where he was going to rape the client. When he got in the house, that's where he raped the client. Yeah, when he was leaving where he raped the client. Can't just be throwing that out every freaking time. Well, I guess you can if the attorneys and the judge let you.
Prior to seeing him on Holmes Road, do you have any information that Travis McMichael is aware that Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road?
No, I think from the interview I got is that he's wanting to loop around and catch him here. Again, that's my interpretation of what he is telling the investigator of the Glenn County Police Department.
That he wants to go all the way around to come back to Burford
And catch him, yes, sir.
and not just back down Burford?
Well, Greg McMichael encourages him to back down Burford and catch him, but Travis says, no, let's loop around.
Okay.
Now, here's the problem when you have a case agent with multiple agencies working. There's no way he knows what everybody said, and there's things that he was told that he remembers and they didn't remember. And there's things that the officers, when they got statements, didn't tell him completely. And when they wrote their statements, they may have left something out. And when you get a cop on the stand, all these cops that he's talking about, well, this agency told me this, and this is what I believe from this agency and this. When these cops get up here, they're going to say, why do you think this officer had the opinion that this happened when you're telling me this didn't happen? So that's why this is important to get all this information, because now in front of the jurors, when we get all these people testifying themselves, now we can poke holes in their clients like, were you guys working together? Because it doesn't sound like your statement sounds completely different to what he told us in the preliminary hearing. And then when you get him back on the stand, you know, when on the preliminary hearing you testified to this, and we heard from Officer so-and-so, he testified to this. Tell me why, where was the breakdown, why you thought what you did, and why you were wrong, because the officer testified that you were absolutely wrong when you testified at the preliminary hearing. And that's going to make this guy do the wiggly and the squirmy in the seat, and he's going to have to talk his way out of it.
But prior to that, you don't have any information that Travis knows Mr. Arbery is on Holmes Road. Is that correct?
Not until he sees him on Holmes Road.
And then he comes up and he turns on Holmes Road and he sees him where you were pointing to, higher up Holmes Road. Is that
Yeah,
right?
yes, sir, I believe
He
so.
drives on the road, physically sees him up there.
I believe so because Mr. Bryan is here. Well, it's probably not that far down. Mr. Bryan is here, and this is where the video starts, and Mr. Arbery coming back towards Mr. Bryan. At that point, Mr. Bryan puts the phone down. He then pulls off the road to allow Travis McMichael's truck to pass.
Did Travis McMichaels ever say to you, or Greg say to you, that he observed the interaction between Mr. Arbery and Mr. Bryan's truck around the end there of Burford Road, where he may have seen Mr. Arbery attacking the truck or acting in an odd manner about the truck?
Well, again, they didn't make a statement to me. They made it to the County Police Department. I did not recall them making any kind of statement about seeing him try to attack Mr.
Arbery's truck, Mr. Bryan's truck on Burford.
I do not recall them making any statement in reference to that.
Because the defense attorney keeps saying this, I'm pretty sure he has a statement from somebody, or his clients told him they told that to somebody.
Then I think what you said is you believe Mr. McMichael sees Mr. Arbery on the upper part of the road, and then is it that they drive past Mr. Arbery?
And that part is not clear in the interview, exactly how they got in front of Mr. Arbery, and it's not really addressed in the interview. That is just me knowing that they're behind him at this point, and at this point they're in front of him. So at some point they had to pass him, but that is not addressed in the interview.
And do you have any information? Okay. So you don't have any information about what kind of interaction, if any, there was that they go past him or what?
It's not mentioned in the interview.
And to make sure, throughout this entire time, do you have any evidence of any kind of texting communications between the McMichaels and Mr. Bryan or anybody else in the neighborhood as they're trying to communicate about Mr. Arbery, where he is and how they can stop him or catch him, as you put it?
I have no evidence of that at this point, no, sir.
And he's asking that. I'm thinking that maybe somebody was on a cell phone or they were talking. Maybe they weren't. Maybe they were screaming. Maybe somebody came out and go, he went that way. And that gave him information.
There's a moment where you talk about Mr. Bryan's video and he starts running his cell phone. Where do you believe he starts to turn on his cell phone and record?
I can't believe they charged the dude following them who was recording them. Now see, what they're not saying here, which is really government's position, government doesn't want citizens defending themselves or catching criminals, because criminals would be nervous and crime would go down. Because citizens are the best protectors of themselves, their family, and their property and their neighborhoods, not the cops. Government doesn't want pesky citizens figuring that out. So when pesky citizens do this and try to do government's job because government's incompetent, government goes after them to discourage other people from doing it. So they pass laws that you can't have a gun. You can't chase people. You're not allowed to arrest. If somebody breaks into your house, you shouldn't resist. If somebody's committing a crime against you, you should cooperate. So they tell you all these things to maintain government control and power on, we will protect you. You don't need a gun. You're too stupid to take the law in your own hands. You're too stupid to stop some criminal from victimizing you. You don't have the training that we get. This is all the subliminal messages that government is sending when they go after citizens who are doing the right thing, protecting their neighborhood, trying to stop crime, trying to confront people, not be wearing their damn pink panties, scared of anything and everything, and when something happens, you should just go hide in a corner and hope it gets better.
And it's hard for me to do it on this map. I believe it's somewhere in this area, but I'm not 100% sure of that. I know it's before this curve here, but I believe it's somewhere in this area.
Okay. And can you hear Mr. Bryan say anything throughout that recording?
I believe he makes a statement speaking to himself at one point of, and it's after he's put the phone down, I believe. He makes some kind of statement, and I don't remember his exact words, but something along the lines of, I'm going to go on, or something like that.
Okay. I thought I recalled you testifying that Mr. Bryan may have said something to the effect of, do you got him, or block him in, or something like that. Where do you hear that statement being made?
Well, I don't hear that. That's the statement that he says he made.
Oh, so he says, Mr. Bryan says, that
Yeah.
he
That when he first sees them before he gets in his truck in pursuit, he asks the people in the truck, which is Travis McMichael, and I don't even know if he saw Greg at that point, but Travis McMichael in the truck that's pursuing Ahmaud Arbery, he asks, "Do you got him?"
He says that's what he says to
Yes,
Greg
sir.
or Travis.
Yes, sir. I believe that's something to that effect. Anyway, I believe that's what he said.
You also mentioned that you think Mr. Arbery ran into a ditch somewhere, or ran down into a ditch. Where is that?
I'm not clear. I believe that's on Burford, and that's from Mr.
Mr. Bryan?
Brian. Thank you. My mind slipped. From Brian's statement that he made that Mr. Arbery kept going into the ditch to get around his vehicle. He was trying to cut him off and block him.
Is this a statement that he made originally to the Glenn County Police Department?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Once the video picks up, and I think you say we see Mr. Arbery running towards Travis McMichael's truck. That truck is parked. Mr. Arbery wrote the video that Mr. Bryan had.
Okay. Yes, sir. Well,
That is under the handheld video of his cell phone.
yes,
On
sir.
Holmes Road.
It's on Holmes Road. He's running towards Mr. Bryan's truck.
He's running, so in the first part of the video,
He's changing direction and coming towards Mr. Bryan's truck.
Mr. Arbery is running towards Mr. Bryan's truck.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we see Mr. McMichael's truck at all during this time?
No, sir.
He's running at him head-on to the car?
It's more an angle, but it looks like he's just changing directions and coming towards Mr. Bryan in the video.
Okay.
And then Mr. Bryan puts his phone down.
He puts his phone down, and then we don't have any orientation at all until he picks it back up.
Yes,
Now
and-
we see him, Mr. Arbery, running towards the McMichaels.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
At that point, I know you said you have a drone doing some mapping and all that. Do you know how far Mr. Arbery was away from Mr. McMichael's truck when that video picks up and we see him running toward the truck? Is it 10 feet, 50 feet, 100 feet? Do we know?
I don't have that information.
Do you have any information that Travis or his father at that opportunity are saying to Mr. Arbery, stop, we want to talk to you, stop, or anything like that? Stop running or whatever.
I believe Greg McMichael's statement is he was saying stop. Travis McMichael's statement, he was saying stop, get on the ground. Those commands were being given to Mr. Arbery
And what is your understanding about why they were saying those things to Mr. Arbery?
because they wanted to detain him and seize him.
For what purpose?
Oh, so they didn't want to shoot him. They wanted to detain him. Thank you.
So the police could come and ID him.
All right. And so in saying that, where is Travis in the video and what is he doing with his shotgun that you can see or that you believe?
Pointing it at Mr. Arbery.
So you're saying the video shows that he's pointing it straight at Mr. Arbery?
His arm is up in a shooting position is what I see. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Is there any evidence that you've been told that you've seen where the gun is just being held down like this?
It appears that he repositions the firearm.
Yeah.
I believe it's more report arms. After you see Mr. Arbery change direction and going towards the passenger side.
Okay. All right. Port arms being holding the butt of the gun down and the barrel up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's not a firing position, is it?
No, sir. This was after he took the firing position.
After I understand he points and says stop, get on the ground.
Mhm.
The stop, get on the ground, where do you hear that on any kind of recording or anything like that?
That's his statement. That's
That's a
Travis.
statement. Okay. Have you listened to the 911 call that Greg McMichael's made?
I have.
Do you hear anything on that call about stop or anything like that?
Mhm.
Okay. Say yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sorry.
This position of holding the barrel of the gun or the front of the gun down, does that have a name? I've heard the term low ready. Does that sound like something that you're familiar with?
That's not what I would call low ready.
Okay. What is low ready?
Low ready would be still in front of you, but down so you can see over the top of it.
Okay. Is that a firing position or is that like a way to hold the gun safely but still holding it?
It would not be safely. It's a way so you can have full view of vision. So you can put up in a firing position very quickly.
Okay. But it's not pointed at somebody at that point. It's pointed down at the ground, is what you're saying?
Well, its purpose is to be able to have a wider field of view so you're not looking down the sight, so you can see the threat, be able to move it into a position to fire very quickly.
I just want to make sure if you're using your pointer, are you demonstrating that
Yes.
you're pointing it down to the ground?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you see evidence of that Mr. Michael had his gun in that position, holding it, pointing down at the ground?
I saw him up in the firing position, and then I believe he moved it to where his hand's up higher, like this. The video that I took.
Have you taken fingerprints of the gun? Or did the Glenn County Police take fingerprints of the shotgun
No, sir.
to try to determine where Mr. Arbery may have grabbed the gun?
No, sir.
Are you freaking kidding me? They didn't fingerprint the freaking gun to show that Arbery grabbed it? Oh my God, what an incompetent freaking move. That is freaking out. I guarantee you before they get in front of a jury, that gun's going to be fingerprinted. I can't believe they did not. How are you looking to see if it's self-defense when you don't even fingerprint a freaking gun? A suspect, a fleeing suspect from a crime scene, grabs a shotgun on video, and you don't fingerprint the gun. Now, it's not that critical because we have it on video of him holding and pulling on the gun. But to me, it's just a normal course of a reasonable investigation that you fingerprint the freaking barrel to get his hand position. I can't believe they didn't freaking fingerprint. Are you freaking kidding me?
Or whether his hand had gotten on the pump of the gun. No fingerprints were taken on the gun.
No, sir.
You know what? How do you know he didn't reach over and pull and make the gun go off by himself? This could have been a suicide. How do you know he didn't try to pull the guy's arm off and he actually hit the trigger? Well, I think the guy gave a statement that he pulled the trigger, but I don't. That to me, that's a pretty incompetent move, not to fingerprint a shotgun, which probably tells me they didn't fingerprint the door handle on the car, which shows they weren't looking for a self-defense angle. They were looking for a governor called my boss angle.
And I think you testified that Mr. McMichael was standing outside of his door, next to his door, until the point where Mr. Arbery changes direction and runs up the passenger side of the truck. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
You can put that.
So another thing that's happening here that you don't realize is the longer a defense can keep the cop on the stand, the better his case gets. You would think get him on and get him off. If it was a short case and there wasn't a lot of facts, then you don't want to let him up here. This case has so much information and so politically hot, and it started with phone calls and canvases and fight over the gun and jogging and mental health. There's so many incidents. The longer you keep the cop on the stand, the better the chances that he will screw up, that he will say something he shouldn't, that he will misstate a fact, that he will stumble. I used to hate getting on the stand. These defense attorneys would keep me there and keep reviewing and keep reviewing. And now when the defense is finished, this cop is finished unless the prosecution asks him questions. If the prosecution asks him questions, now the defense gets a second bite at the cop. Man, that used to piss me off. We're at a prelim. We get this shit out. We get the guy. We're going to get a holding order. Let's move on. And the freaking prosecution wants to start asking me questions about stupid shit that don't matter because he wants to get a couple points and show up the other attorney. In the meanwhile, he gets me to answer something that he probably shouldn't have, or that's going to come out wrong and hurt his case, and now the defense gets to pursue that and come back. And then he asks me a bunch of questions on something that I never had to talk about, and it ends up hurting the case. And the defense will be like, man, or the prosecution, you get off the stand, it's like, man, I really wish you hadn't have said that. And I was like, well, if you hadn't asked the freaking question, he wouldn't have got a second bite, and I didn't have to answer it. If you don't want me to answer shit, don't ask me freaking questions afterwards. I mean, you know, the prosecution's always going to blame the cop. Always.
And talk is the only evidence that you have of what happens next. It simply comes from the video and talking with Travis, McMichael, Greg McMichael, and Mr. Bryant.
And the body of Mr. Arbery, which has the holes in it.
There's no other cameras from any homes along Holmes Drive or anything like that?
Not that we've been able to locate, no, sir.
Okay.
Notice how he slid in the dead body? And the body. Yeah, where your client shot him. Yeah. So this cop, again, is pushing his agenda of his charge because he charged it. Look, the last thing this cop wants to do is piss off his boss who got a call from the governor. And if they want a conviction, this cop's going to do everything he can to give them what they want. But Rick, I thought he took an oath to tell the truth. Well, honest cops will do that. But if you're being handed a high-profile case like this, my guess is you're a team player. They trust you to support the team. They trust you not to sell them out. They trust you not to be 100% truthful if it'll hurt the case. They trust him to get them their conviction. Okay?
And so what is it that you understand Travis is thinking as he is standing at now the front of his truck as Mr. Arbery runs up the passenger side?
I'm going to object to the phrasing of the question because that would clearly call for speculation about what somebody is thinking. I don't mind them asking as a fact matter what was said about what was thinking, but that's two distinct, different questions.
I agree. You can't be testifying to somebody's state of mind. Well, sometimes you can if you're an expert and certain things, then you can give an opinion on it. But normally you don't want to testify to state of mind of people unless you know, you have other information that tells you why their state of mind was that way. Either they said something, they left a note, a prior comment, a 911 call, something like that. So when he asked him, what do you think he was thinking, that's a pretty good objection.
What did Travis tell you he was thinking as Mr. Arbery came up the right side of the truck toward the front of the truck?
He didn't tell me anything.
What did he tell the Glenn County Police?
His statement to Glenn County Police was that as Mr. Arbery was coming at him, that, again, he'd already stated that at 30 to 40 yards away, he could tell that Mr. Arbery was going to fight. So as he saw Mr. Arbery coming towards him, that Mr. Arbery squared up, that he shot him. He said that he was concerned.
What does that mean, squared up?
That's the word he uses.
What did you understand to mean?
That as he was running towards him, he squared up in like a fighting stance, or something along those lines.
And that
But-
proceeded, sorry? Your Honor, were you trying to ask something? Oh, I thought I heard Your Honor starting to speak. That Travis said he perceived that he was about to be assaulted prior to shooting the first shot.
Yes, that's correct.
And did Greg McMichael or Travis say that Travis was in fact struck before the first shot was fired?
Greg McMichael said that, but his interpretation, what he's describing is actually the second shot.
But I guess the information coming from Greg McMichael is that Mr. Arbery did.
So he just testified to the interpretation of the person he wants to convict, but he couldn't testify to what someone else is thinking. That should have been an objection. How do you know what his interpretation was?
Back strike his son Travis prior to the first shot. Is that
Yes.
what he said?
He did, but he also said it was only 2 shots.
Okay, that's
And his description of where the shooting took place is on the side of the truck, not the front of the truck.
okay.
Mr. Travis McMichael said that he was not sure that if he was struck before the first shot. He said he squared up. He said we were all tangled up. He was not sure if Mr. Arbery's hand was on his shirt when he shot him.
Okay, this is kind of I mean, it's not so critical. They're going to make it critical. But if a guy squares up and comes after you when you've got a gun and you're telling him to stop, that's not reasonable. And it damn sure isn't fearful. People who are scared do not approach somebody with a fighting stance when they got a gun. So the fact that he did this means he's unreasonable. And we already know that he has mental issues and he was hallucinating. Maybe he saw Mr. McMichaels, whoever one of them is, maybe he saw him as a demon. Maybe he was attacking him because he was having a hallucinogenic episode. We don't know that because he's dead, but it's possible. So when he says we don't know if he hit him, and when he talks about a fighting stance, again, they need to put this back in cops' perspective. Well, let me ask you, officer, have you ever had a suspect square off on you or get in a fighting stance when you were trying to arrest him? Yes. What does that mean to you? Means I thought the guy was going to punch me and hit me. Okay. So, I mean, they need to, I really think they need to start trying to relate this more to cops, because one of these guys was a cop, and get these cops to testify with their experience and training what they would do in the same situation. Now, the prosecution is going to say, but these officers weren't in uniforms, they were cop. Doesn't matter. Their state of mind was the same as a cop, because one did police activities by boarding boats and handling dangerous people with a firearm to defend himself, and the other one was a retired cop that has a lot of experience in dealing with dangerous people. So their frame of mind is the same as a cop. So if you can relate this and connect it to police work, you get these cops testifying to help your client versus sitting up here like they were just a couple vigilantes that want to shoot this guy because the governor called my boss.
Did Travis tell you that when that first shot went off, that Mr. Arbery had in fact grabbed the gun prior to the shot going off?
Travis
Did
McMichael?
Travis tell you?
No. Glenn County Police Department, he indicated,
I apologize.
that's all right.
You know what I mean.
I do,
We
but
want to be accurate.
we want to be accurate.
Did
And
Travis tell the Glenn County Police Department that Mr. Arbery had placed his hands on the gun prior to him shooting it the first time?
no, I believe he did not say that the hand was on the gun before he shot.
Just that Mr. Arbery was squared up, ready to fight.
And he
may
said
have grabbed him.
and may have grabbed him. He says may have hit him. He was not sure about that. He was very inconsistent about what occurred during that time frame, because he said his adrenaline was pumping and it happened very quickly.
Okay, he may have been inconsistent, but you would agree that his statement is consistent of violence, being attacked, and fearful that he might lose his gun or that he had to defend himself. We can agree that maybe he was off on the words, but all the statements have a common theme that this guy was being aggressive, attacking, charging, and was a threat. And you couple that with him being a threat, fleeing a crime scene. Rick, there wasn't a crime. He was trespassing. It was a crime scene. We just don't know if it was a felony crime scene.
Did he say that he was afraid of being beat or assaulted by Mr. Arbery?
He said he was afraid that Mr. Arbery would get hold of the shotgun. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Reasonable fear. Very reasonable. Who would be afraid if you got a gun on somebody and you're telling them to stop? Who thinks you wouldn't be afraid if that person charged you and tried to take your gun? Nobody. You can't find one cop out there that said, if I'm pointing a gun at somebody and they charge me, I'm shooting. If they put their hands on my gun, I'm shooting. If I think they're grabbing for my gun and miss, I'm shooting. This guy is aggressive. He is dangerous. He's not reasonable. He might be on drugs. He might be under the influence. He might be hallucinating on something because he has mental illness. There's all kind of things that they can say and paint a picture on why these guys' fear was reasonable. I'm at 36 minutes. All right, I guess we'll go to part 8. This is part 7.